During the few moments that we have left, we want to have just an off-the-cuff chat.
Even though we understood the conditions, we didn't have the language. We didn't have the words of colonialism and imperialism and capitalism. That language wasn't accessible to me in my neighborhood. But we understood it because we were already living mutual aid. We already all took care of each other in my neighborhood. We already didn't call the police.
But over the last few years, there has come into being another kind of political prison. And I'm talking about all of the sisters and brothers who are victims of the system, who are easy targets of the police, who get railroaded through the courts into prison, often for no reason at all, who are there only because they're black.
Right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Yeah, my name is Selinda Guerrero. My last name Guerrero literally translates to warrior. So for me, I feel like I always talk about this, that nobody really chooses to be in the movement. Nobody has chosen to be a revolutionary. It chooses us. This is how it happens. And to me, I feel like it's always been in me. It's something that I have always cared about. I've always cared about fairness and justice. I've always cared about my people. And when I think back um, to my very early, as far back as I can remember, my dad who raised me, my stepdad. He um, he was a Vietnam era veteran, and he came home addicted to heroin. And so I grew up from a toddler with my dad, who was the person who would pick me up from preschool, and he would take us to the park, and I would be with little girls whose dads were also fixing with him at the park. And we used to know all the rules about, oh, they're gonna nod out and then they're gonna take us to the bathroom and then we could do, and we understood already. But I was like doing harm reduction work in preschool. I was like, and the needles, you don't touch the needles. Remember this, so it was like from a very young age, always thinking about the safety of our people. How do we continue to be safe even in the conditions that we're in? My very earliest memories were going with my mom to the Santa Fe prison in New Mexico. That's the grounds of one of the worst prison riots in the United States. And at 3, 4 years old, being in prison visiting rooms with my mom, she was always the person who was helping to hold down everybody in our family that was being impacted by state violence. So from very, very young, I was already watching my environment and trying to understand and grapple with like what's going on, what needs to change, how do we be safe, and always understanding that in this empire that prisons and police were never for us, that there was something different that was intended for us as a people. And I was an eighth grade push out of middle school. I was a street hustler in the 90s. I've been an organizer for 35 years now, since I was a teen. Um, I I had my first son at 16 years old, and I decided we had to stop selling dope at that time and make some changes. And that's what led me to the movement. And at that point, I started working with my people and meeting all these really incredible elders and mentors in my community and understanding political education. Because even though we understood the conditions, we didn't have the language. We didn't have the words of colonialism and imperialism and capitalism. That language wasn't accessible to me in my neighborhood. But we understood it because we were already living mutual aid. We already all took care of each other in my neighborhood. We already didn't call the police. So we were already creating that liberated society in our own neighborhoods. even when we didn't have the language for it. So being able to get access to education and to really study, to study underneath elders and mentors, to really grapple with what does it mean to be a revolutionary? And that's what led me on this path that I'm in today. And I'm almost 50 years old now, and I've been doing this for 35 years and have had the honor to organize both locally in my own neighborhood all the way to nationally and internationally now. And really get access to brilliant minds and be able to ask incredible questions to thinkers like Albert Woodfox, Aaron Dixon. Bahati. I've had like some really, really incredible mentors. Richard Moore led the Black Berets in the Chicano movement in the Southwest. And so I have um, I have been exposed um, to some really, really brilliant minds who have guided me and mentored me in this work. Um, and really, the brothers behind the walls, like, I can't say enough about that. Like, sometimes this work feels really heavy, and the greatest inspiration that I ever get to keep pushing comes from people that are never going to see the streets again. It's my brothers that are on, doing death by incarceration sentences, or who are on death row in California, or my brothers in Louisiana, from Angola to David Wade and on, Connecticut and Alabama. Like, these brothers, I've been working with them for like 10 years, and they all the time, they're just always speaking life into me in this movement. And I just can't say enough about being like having the honor to be able to work with all of these brilliant, brilliant people who have laid the foundation before us, and that we continue to carry forward. But that's how I got here.
I
Okay.
do got a question on that though,
Go ahead, War.
because what separates you from any other pregnant 16-year-old? How I'm just, and I want to draw into that because this is the condition a lot of teens find themselves in. So what actually, because I grew up dealing with a similar situation in regards to my father being a Vietnam veteran, PTSD, and and hooked on crack. And so the deal is, what actually about your condition made you look around at someone at 16 getting ready to have a baby and actually just completely change your life? Because it almost sound like you went cold turkey in terms of looking at what was going on. So can you elaborate a little bit on what actually brought about that consciousness?
Yeah, I've wrote about and journaled about that. What was it, that really switched for me? And I think I remember this night. So we were still serving dope at this time, and my baby was like a newborn. He was probably just a couple of months old. And all night long, this is 1993, and all night long, the smokers coming to the window all night, waking up my baby, you know? And here I am, a teen mom trying to figure this out, and I'm getting frustrated. And and I just keep thinking back to that time. And I just remember the next day looking at his dad and being like, we got to do something different. Like, he deserves something that we didn't get access to. And I don't know what it is, but we have to figure it out. And we got to stop selling dope today, because I can't have the smokers waking up my baby all night. And he's just looking at me like, what? You won the lottery? Like, what are you talking about? You just, hey, we just gonna, this is our economic structure, like, what you mean? And he wasn't with it, and I took my baby and I just went out and started signing up for any program I could find. Any program I could find. I didn't care if they were giving away shoes or some books or education or school or housing. I signed up for anything I could find. And in those weeks that I was doing that activity, I realized that some of those nonprofits and people who said that they were doing work for me, for my demographic, they were right in my neighborhood. They were working at a building right up the street from the corner I sold dope on. And they drove to work every day and left work every day and drove right past us and couldn't see us and didn't talk to us, but called themselves doing work for us. And I said, nah, my job right now is to go get all them resources and bring them back to the people because they can't see us. And there's a whole bunch of us out here who are unseen. And they can't see all of us who are invisible out here who are in the struggle. And somebody has to connect that. Somebody has to be a connector. And I remember being in this mindset of because I was a hustler. So my mentality at the moment was go collect all the shit and bring it back to the people. And that's what I was on early as an organizer was going and collecting all any and all resources that I could find and bringing them back. And I'm still doing that. Now we have Albuquerque Mutual Aid, but I think that, like I said, it was always in me, and I think that it chooses me because I can't explain why I survived when everybody around me died or went to prison. Literally, I probably have a handful of people who made it out of 1993 and 1990 and 89, that I was running with back then. And one of my elder mentors in Louisiana, because I used to have this introduction where I would say, statistically, I'm not supposed to be here, but I am. But I am. And that's why I do my work. And he said, little sister, you got to stop introducing yourself like that. He said, you're supposed to be here. He said in the Quran, it talks about that there's always a witness. There's always a witness, and that's who you are. The things that you experienced, watching your peers die around you, watching what crack did to your neighborhood, watching what heroin did to your family, watching what incarceration has done to your relatives. You're a witness to the things that are happening. And that's the wisdom that's necessary for you to go forward to do this work. That connection, that witness, that proximity. That's why. That's why you're able to do this work, because you understand it in that way, because you've been a witness. So you're supposed to be here. So don't count yourself down, he said. Don't say that you're not supposed to be here. You were supposed to be here, and you were supposed to be a witness. You were chosen for that.
True indeed. True indeed. Well, you have anything else before I move on?
No, she hit it.
All right. All right. For those who don't know, can you introduce the listening audience to Millions for Prisoners New Mexico? Can you tell us a little bit about the organization and how it started?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I was already doing community organizing. We were Black Lives Matter New Mexico. We were doing or youth justice work under Save the Kids from Incarceration, which uses hip hop culture to excuse me, to address conditions with our youth. And always I always cared about the babies. That's where my heart is. And so always been doing youth work. And I heard Crystal Roundtree on a podcast, and she was talking about organizing 1 million people to march on Washington, D.C. for Black August in the name of prisoners' rights. And I was like, oh, shoot, I got to be part of this. And I was inspired by listening to her. And I reached out, I found her, connected to her. And she was one of the people who were helping organize with Max Parthas, Rebecca Hensley, many, many abolitionists from across the nation and the world were organizing this effort in 2017. And it was 2016. So they were like a whole year ahead of this march that was going to happen. So I started working with her, and I said, look, I can't go to Washington, D.C., but I can help organize cities, and do solidarity actions. So we organized a solidarity action in New Mexico for Millions for Prisoners. And that's where the name comes from, was 1 million people marching on Washington, D.C. in the name of prisoners' rights. And it was in coordination with Jailhouse Lawyers Speak. And they had collected a list of 10 demands from behind the walls from prisoners all over the nation. And those demands is what they were using as the platform during this Millions for Prisoners March. And we wanted to lift those up and amplify them. And so we held our solidarity action. We ended up with like 17 cities who did solidarity actions in addition to the masses that marched on Washington, D.C. that Black August. And after that, the name stuck, Millions for Prisoners. And so now we call ourselves that and we stand on that. We're still organizing millions of people in the names of prisoners' rights who are advocates, who are community members, who are impacted people, who are prisoners, who are children, who are community members, and we're continuing to organize on behalf. And this is an abolitionist movement because we understand that slavery never ended in the United States Empire. It has only reinvented itself into so many different ways. So not just about abolishing, the prison industrial complex, but also the root of what slavery has done in this empire, because we think about all the badges and incidents of slavery that is all around us. There's badges and incidents all around us of what that looks like and all the different ways that these systems of oppression and these tools of the empire have like reinvented themselves, right? When we think about Jim Crow law and second class citizenship, well, what does it mean to be marked as a felon in this society? It has the same implications. When we think about chattel slavery and we look at places like Texas and Louisiana and Alabama, where they still have plantations, that like these things haven't ended. In Camp J in Angola right now, the brothers won their lawsuit to not have to go into the fields this last summer. And so in Angola, they turned the work camp, Camp J, they turned it into an immigrant detention camp so that they could have the immigrants now go into the fields because they're not about to give up that economy. So we know that it's not just about people convicted of a felony, right? It's about that Southern economy and chattel slavery and the root of the rotten tree that this empire was birthed from. And we have to get at that root. We got to get at that root and abolish that stuff from the bottom because that's the way it's got to be talked about, and it's got to be done with an international lens. We talk about, doing it with solidarity with people of oppressed communities all across the world, from Palestine to Colombia. It doesn't matter. We're all connected in this. We're unified in this struggle. And so, when we think about what the Millions for Prisoners mission is, we are modern day abolitionists who are still trying to realize Reconstruction, who are still trying to end the genocide and slavery that this rotten empire was founded upon. And so we're modern day abolitionists. That's what our work is.
Okay, true indeed. You already answered a few of the other questions I was going to ask on that. One thing I want to touch on, you keep saying abolitionist. So what's the difference between a prisoner abolitionist and a prison reform? What would be the differences for the listening audience?
Yeah, reformists, we always talk about reformists just want a nicer prison. They just want they want softer cages. Um, we talked about this with some legislators in New Mexico because they're trying to build a new juvenile detention center. It's really a kid's prison that they're trying to build. But they're like, oh, but the walls will be painted in different colors and the kids will be able to feel good. Well, they're like locked in cages. And I'm like, "What?
Yeah.
Can you see yourself?" So there's no such thing as a nicer prison. There's no such thing as a nicer cage. Um, we know from the legacy of our people that we've never needed prisons and police. We've never needed those structures. We've never needed these kinds of systems in our communities, and we know how to solve our own problems. And the other thing we also know very well is that when people's needs are met, that you know people generally, violence dissipates when people feel like they have security and peace with their own selves and their own communities. And you know, that's what capitalism does, right? Like people aren't safe if I'm hungry. And so when we live in a structure, an empire that is starving us by design, you know, it is designed to create structures of violence. It's designed to use violence as a tool against us. It's taught us that that is the answer. And so we don't need prisons and police. We don't need them. We don't need them. There's other solutions. There's other ways, and we know that as abolitionists that we're really yes, it's about burning down the prisons. Like if I could just crack open all the prison doors right now and set everybody free, I would. If I had the power to do that. But you know, it's not just about that. It's about we have to actually we are in a crumbling empire. We're in a crumbling empire, and we have to be able to realize that we have to build the world that we all need. And I like big shout out to E. You know, you're doing that. You're in practice of building the world that we need. That's gonna be what we're gonna we're gonna need that network, that mutual aid network of farmers and people that are already building sanctuary places, because we're in a crumbling empire. This shit ain't gonna last. It's not gonna go that long. You know, in the history of the world, empires have gone about 500 years, and we're right at the cusp of that. And so realizing how fascism has taken hold right now in this moment is because it's trying to sustain itself. It's fighting to survive, but it's not going to make it. History has revealed that already. And so, you know, it's a big difference. We're not, we're waiting for this shit to crumble and burn as we're building the world that we actually need in real
Mm,
time.
mm. E, that sound like you. That sound like somebody heard you say before. But okay, I'm gonna move on. E, you muted if you were trying to say something. But okay. Now I got another question. Millions for Prisoners have been deeply involved in restoring voting rights and formerly incarcerated people in New Mexico. Can you kind of walk us through the work that Millions for Prisoners have been doing around voter registration and rights restoration?
Absolutely. So this actually is a demand from the Brothers Behind the Walls. It came in and the Sisters Behind the Walls. Like these came in the 10 demands in 2017, was a demand to be counted in the democracy. Um, and so the right to vote was the 10th demand listed in those demands that year. So we're, you know, as organizers and people like my job, right, is as an organizer is to listen to the people, hear what their demands are, hear what their needs are, and then organizing the resources and the people to try to achieve that goal. So as an organizer in 2016, 2017, I'm looking at the demands and I'm like, okay, ending death by incarceration, right? Like, okay, that's big. I don't know if we're gonna make a lot of progress there yet. Um, but looking down the list of the 10, I saw, oh, okay, the right to vote. That's pretty easy to talk about because it's a badged incident of slavery. We already talk about that. And so it felt like one of the demands that felt more accessible to try to go after right away. So we immediately organized in for 2019 legislative session in New Mexico to introduce a legislative bill that would abolish felony disenfranchisement in voting in New Mexico. We wanted it gone, right? And so I spent that year like building it up, talking to politicians. At this time, Deborah Holland, who ended up being like secretary of something under Biden eventually, but she at this time she's not even elected to any office, and she's running for Congress. And so I'm practicing on her. And I'm like, well, you're a politician who's running for Congress right now. Have you considered going and talking to your community members that are behind the walls? How many prison pods have you visited to talk to your constituents? How much time have you spent making sure that they know what you're talking about and what you want for the people? How many jails have you visited? All of them have the right to vote already. And so we're having this dialogue, and she's looking at me confused, like, oh, what do you mean? You mean like me? Go to like a prison and like talk to the people? And I said, absolutely, those are your constituents. And she said, huh, I never considered that. She said, thank you for telling me about that. I'm going to think about that. And I said, well, I said, I want you to know that we're introducing a bill based on the demands from the prisoners who want the right to vote. And we're going to be working to reestablish their right to vote because this is a badging incident of slavery and it needs to be abolished. So either you believe in slavery or you don't. Where do you stand as a Democrat? And that's the way I would pose it to them, all the politicians. Like, if you believe in disenfranchising all of these people who are prisoners or former prisoners, then you believe in slavery because that's where it evolved from. That's where disenfranchisement comes from. It comes directly as a badging incident of that oppression, of saying that we are not whole, that we are still three-fifths or not entitled or somehow not citizens. And so, no, we don't get to have that narrative. You don't get to have that narrative and call yourself a progressive Democrat or whatever you're trying to call yourself right now. Or even the Republicans who say we believe in restoration and in our religion, people can be redeemed. Well, if that's what you believe, then you need to restore everybody's right to vote, period. Period, because it's not even connected to criminality in any way, shape, or form. It's just something that got put in as a way to oppress people and suppress our communities. And so we introduced our bill in 2019. We came with so much fire, they didn't know what to do with us. And so it was a week before the end of the legislative session, and the leader of the House, Democrats, called me into his office and he said, we're going to kill your bill. And he was sitting with a lobbyist. And he said, we're going to kill your bill. It's not going to move forward this legislative session. And I said, oh, that's because even conservative Democrats don't exist in a world where everybody can vote. So I understand why you don't want my people to vote. But okay, I'm going to go ahead and tell everybody about this conversation. And I just lit it up. But, as grassroots community organizers who are abolitionists, we don't care about a politician's feelings. We don't care about telling the truth about those behind the door, closed door conversations. When you see these nonprofits out here doing work, in these structures, they coddle politicians a lot, because they have to lobby them. They got to take them to dinners and schmooze them and ask them for their. Nah, we just need you to do your job. We're not doing that. We're the community. This is what our demands are, and you need to respond to them. And if you don't respond to them, then we're going to get you removed from office, period. And so from 19 to 23, we were able to advance voting rights in New Mexico. It used to be you have to complete your entire sentence, including all fines and fees, right? Which is taxes, that's poll taxing. So you had to finish all fines and fees, your whole sentence, and probation and parole to be eligible to vote in New Mexico. That's what the conditions were until 2023. Now, as long as you're not in a DOC facility, a Department of Corrections facility, you can vote. So people who are in jails, people who are on probation and parole, people still finishing out their sentence on the streets, all get to vote in New Mexico. So our bill in 2023 was a compromise bill that got us one more step forward, but it expanded voting rights to more than 11,000 people in New Mexico. But what happened as soon as our bill passed is our Secretary of State did not do any updates to the website, to the forms. They were still disenfranchising our people. They were still, all our folks, we were registering them to vote, and they were still getting denial letters because of convicted of a felony. So now we have an active lawsuit against the state of New Mexico. We're suing them on behalf of our people, Millions for Prisoners is, because they're still disenfranchising our people. So we're actually in district court right now in New Mexico, and we're in active litigation on this on this issue because we're not going to be turned away. We're going to continue to be 10 toes down until everybody has access and everybody is recognized, and those demands are met. And so, we're still working on the list of demands from the brothers. We've introduced also last year we introduced the abolish slavery bill in New Mexico to abolish slavery from our New Mexico Constitution. And we got a hearing on it. We also reintroduced our bill on voting rights that is just to abolish the practice altogether because we're still after that. Like, yes, you got us a compromise. Yes, we're still litigating, but we want all of our people to have access. And so we're going to continue to fight for those things. And we've still been introducing these radical bills. Democrats will call us aside, in the halls of the legislative session and say, "Well, Selinda, we don't want to have to vote on slavery." I'm like, "Are you serious? You don't want to have to make a vote on the record to say you are for or against slavery right now in 2025?" It's amazing how when you make it that matter of fact and that simple, it confuses them. The Speaker of the House called us into a meeting and he said, "Selinda, I saw your bill, but if you just want the prisoners to get paid better, why don't you just introduce that bill?" And I said, "I'm not just about prisoners' wages. We're actually trying to abolish slavery. And we have to abolish it in our Constitution to lay the legal foundation for where we're going about prisoners' rights." So when we look at Colorado, who's already abolished slavery, right, and we look at the litigation that they've been able to move forward now, now everybody's getting paid in Colorado. They have better wages now, and they're able to send money home to their families. And so these steps are to lay the foundation towards freedom. We're trying to get our people freed. And sometimes you have to use tools that are inside of the structure, and sometimes you got to do direct action, which we've done too. We've held protests at prisons and shut down prisoner transport, and we've done all kinds of radical things. And so, as an organizer, we know it's going to take the many tactics and many strategies to be able to uh, fight this monster that we're in and advance us, right? Like us towards freedom. And as somebody who's a liberation fighter, I feel like that's what we're about. We just want to keep doing all the tactics, all the strategies to try to get us.
You're freezing up, Selinda. Is she froze to y'all too?
Yeah, she froze.
All right. Must be a bad Wi-Fi connection.
A lot of times when you freeze, you don't know. She probably don't even know she froze
She
yet.
froze. Yeah.
Yeah. I did want to ask her if I get a chance to just go a little bit more into the element of uh, fighting against slavery because that poses the whole thing that a lot of people wasn't familiar with when the private prisons call themselves trying to sue because there's not enough beds getting filled. And I definitely want to hear her take on that because now when we talk about that, we're talking about the whole underlining message or underlining a goal of prisons. Because if they're suing because not enough people are fulfilling the beds, that basically means that this is all about profit. Selena, did you hear me? I wanted you to speak on the whole thing about the major move that you're trying to do, which is eliminate slavery from the Constitution. Because again, if the private prisons are trying to sue because of not enough beds are getting filled, that just tells you that this is all about money, and that's the bottom line. So, speak on that for a minute.
Absolutely. We actually, I infiltrated the core civic stockholder call last quarter, or the first quarter of this last year, 2025. Um, and it's on our YouTube channel if anybody ever wants to check it out. Our YouTube channel is called We Are the Revolution. And that's our channel, but it's on there. It's the Core Civic stockholder meeting, and literally I wept through the entire recording that I made because I've worked on the ground in Alabama, and in Louisiana and in Florida. And when you go to places that are the belly of the beast, when you go see the Whitney plantation, when you go, to these places that are historically our ancestors had these experiences, you really get a sense of why we have to do this work. Um, Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but um, take me back. What was your question again? I'm sorry, I got a little bit.
Basically just dealing with the fact that this is really all about profit, the
Yes.
bottom line.
Okay. So,
Because
so I wept through this whole Core Civic call because all I could see was the auction blocks. As I'm listening to them, they're saying, we got 1,700 beds in this facility, and we got 1,200 beds we're going to activate in this one. And this facility is going to be family housing. We'll be able to hold the children there. And they're talking about this real callously in this call about how much profit they anticipate to make. And then when they went to the question part, a woman who was a shareholder got on, and her question was, how fast can we make this happen? Because the Trump administration is saying 6 months. Can't we make it happen faster? And they were literally talking about the selling of bodies, the selling and trading of bodies, right? And that's what this empire is founded on. And that's what this is all about. And it's all about money. This is a money game. And this is why we see these multi-billion dollar um, corporations moving in. So now we see this evolution in the modern prison industrial complex, moving from these plantation labor sites like Angola to what we see on the West Coast is warehousing of bodies. From New Mexico to California, we have warehouses. We have prisoners who are inside of buildings for decades, who don't go outside, who don't get to walk a yard ever. They don't get to walk a yard. They're warehoused because they are now the commodity that's for sale. And so that's what you see in the private prison industry. And when Trump got elected, the Core Civic stock went up 300% in one day. In one day, because they knew what it was. They knew what it was. And so not much has changed. The empire has always been human traffickers. And they're continuing to do that. They're continuing to human traffic and now making deals with places like El Salvador to sell bodies to. And now, unfortunately, African countries, which, we got to also grapple with in our Pan-Africanism. We look at places like Ghana and Burkina Faso, places that are trying to free Africa, and then you see the other places that are so colonized still, that are playing into the trading and selling of our bodies. Um, but yeah, and not much has changed there. And this is all about an economic structure. This entire empire is just about an economic structure. And I think once our people can really wrap their minds around that it's actually just that. Like we're all just slaves to capitalism. Like even if we're not confined inside of a prison or a jail, we're still enslaved. Like think about, what does a credit score mean in this society? You can't have a credit score without debt.
Mhm.
You can't have a credit without having a debt to the empire. So when we think back about what was happening on the prison plantations during chattel slavery, at the stores that were on the plantations, the enslaved people have their needs met had to have a debt to the store, and they couldn't, even after freedom happens, they still have a debt. They can't get free. They're still economic slaves to these places. They're still bound. And they didn't ever get rid of that. They just made it bigger and expanded it. And we don't even think twice about that. In this society, we're so colonized into this empire to believe in capitalism. When we think about the earth gives us every single thing we need to survive. The earth provides shelter and food and water. And, we can build everything we can for free off the earth, except for that we live inside of an economic structure that doesn't allow us to, right? That charges us to exist. It charges us to exist. And when we grapple with that, we can recognize that we are actually economic slaves inside of an empire. And now that we can see that for what it is, that we're actually, this is an economic issue, this is a labor issue that we're dealing with. Now we can have a real conversation about what change needs to happen and really do it from a revolutionary lens.
Now what you just said leads me to the next question that I think that actually segues real well, because what you're talking about is something that people have to be at a certain level of understanding to be able to grasp. And as a community organizer, how do you go about trying to raise the consciousness of the people? That becomes, in my mind, a very important thing, because we can't get people to understand. What you just said made all the sense in the world. But if a person is not looking at that through that lens, then they're never looking at their reality from that perspective. And to see that, you have to raise the consciousness of the people. Huey P. Newton once said that the job of the revolutionary is not to bring about revolution. The job of the revolutionary is to raise the consciousness of the people. The people
Yes.
bring about revolution. So what's your
Yes.
thoughts on that, on raising the consciousness of the people?
Yes, you're speaking to my heart. That's exactly it, right? We can't talk about trying to be free until we free our minds first. I always, as an abolitionist, I always lead conversations with asking community members to, the first cop you got to get rid of is the one in your head. That's the first cop you got to get rid of, because they've trained you to be policed. They've trained you to believe that this is normal, that this is a normal existence, that we're supposed to be policed, right? So we got to get rid of that first. The consciousness is where it's at. If we free our minds, and we can free the land, we can free the people. And so when I do this work, I feel like one of the most radical acts that we can do is any act that's anti-capitalist, right? We do everything that we do is from an anti-capitalist lens. So doing things like mutual aid. We founded Albuquerque Mutual Aid in 2020, but we've always done mutual aid. So for we'll do community events. Everybody gets to eat. Food is free. All of the entertainment's free. Anything that the children want to do is free. We're bringing snow cones. We're bringing popcorn. Like anything that we can do is free. We do community share spaces where we'll set it up like almost like a yard sale, and people can come and exchange. They can bring things, they can take things, and everything's free. And people will walk up and they'll say, "What do you mean everything's free? I could just grab anything that I want?" Yeah, you can have anything that you need. Whatever you need here, if we got it, you got it. If we have food, you got food. We're all eating together. Everybody gets it. And that is what the Panthers led with, right? They taught us and showed us by virtue of doing those anti-capitalist acts, like food is free, is a radical act. And it's one of the most radical things that we do in our community organizing work, way beyond like a standoff at a prison and some of the other crazy stuff we've done before. The most radical thing that we do is when we're in community and we're telling people everybody gets to eat. Everybody gets access to food. What do you need? Oh, you need a bed? We got beds. We got you. Oh, you need help with your utility bill? We got you. And we're biased for us with us. This is not the government. This isn't anybody. This is us looking out for us. This is us taking care of us, because your survival is my survival. We are connected. We are connected. And as soon as you have those kind of conversations with community members, They understand it because people who are already living in these kinds of conditions that are experiencing poverty and over policing and the carceral state, like I said, when I was 14 and I was a street hustler, I already knew and understood, but I didn't have the language. I didn't have the same comprehension. But when somebody said, "Oh, that's called mutual aid," or "That's called anti-capital," or "That's called," like what dope dealer wasn't feeding the block? Even though we were hustling in our own economic structure, and maybe we were naive, we didn't understand how we were hurting our own people, but it was the only economic structure that we understood. But we were still using it to still feed our blocks. And so when we think about those kinds of radical acts of being able to help people move in their consciousness, you know, that's like I think that's one of the most radical things that we do is mutual aid and anti-capitalist work. As soon as we start talking about it from that lens, people understand. But I'm really lucky that I'm in a territory in New Mexico that well, it's been twice colonized. And where I live in the Southwest, um, this is a place that has always, we call it unceded, because we've never unceded our lands to the U.S. empire. We're still fighting as Pueblo people. I'm Pueblo and I'm Black and I'm Chicano. And that's what's in me. And where I live, like New Mexico became a state in 1912. Our people, my mother's side of the family, has been on the lands that they were on as far back as we can trace. And so we've never unceded our lands. We have never unceded our territories to this empire. And so we have always continued to fight. So all that to say, I'm very lucky to be organizing in New Mexico because our people are already understand it. We have deep indigenous community roots there, and people have been in resistance for centuries. So a lot of our people, as soon as we say it, they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember. I know now." We just have to remind our folks. But I think it gets a little hard. I feel like some of the hardest organizing that I've done has been in the South. It's really hard because the colonization is so deep and the oppression is so deep and the manipulation is so deep. The robbing of the education system that happened with the Daughters of the Confederacy after the Civil War. I think about what Brian Stevenson says when he said, the North won the war, but the South won the narrative. And when you look at places in the South that are still honoring the Confederacies, that are still, the people in Alabama don't know even the history of the lands that they're standing on often because it's been hidden from them. They've been told this story that the Civil War was about states' rights and all these weird narratives. And so it's a much deeper unpacking depending on where you're organizing at different places. As a national organizer, I get the honor to go into these different places to organize, and you definitely will see different levels of consciousness. But I feel like um, the more people have been pushed out of the public school system, the more easy it is for them because they don't have to decolonize as much. When you talk about people who left the school system in middle school and high school, versus somebody who went all the way to a master's degree. The person that went all the way to a master's degree has a fundamental belief in this structure. It's harder for them to grapple with the idea, oh my gosh, I've worked my whole life to have a good credit score. What do you mean I'm a slave to an economic structure? I can't, they can't wrap their minds around it. They're too smart.
Well, that's called being invested in the system. And
They
so
are.
from that standpoint, they're at the point where they're benefiting from the system.
They're
And
because they're all in, right? They're all
yeah,
in. They're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt in university. They're all in on this game that's been run on them. And so when you talk to a 14-year-old street hustler, who clearly sees this shit ain't for me. They're like, oh yeah, I understand that. Shoot, yeah, for real. Yep, we got to feed ourselves. Let's go plant a garden.
Mm, mm. I one question moving into that consciousness, uh, and anybody on the show can answer this. How does fear, trauma, or survival mode thinking affect consciousness? Because the sister was just talking about, people that get to the level of a master's degree, they're invested into the system. But what about the people that are they in the fields, but they still can't understand the ideal that they're slaves, or the ideal that consciousness needs to be raised. And a lot of that deals with the fear, the trauma, and that just I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to live day to day. How does that affect consciousness and the thinking of our people?
So we talk about healing justice a lot in our work. We have to heal as a people if we're when we're doing this work because it can feel we're re-traumatized every fucking day out here that we're doing this work. You know, when I'm on the streets doing cop watch or having to organize to protect people that are being traumatized and abused by the state. Brand new mothers in New Mexico are having their babies taken right now under the governor's new law, that if you have used any substance, they're taking your babies now. She's already stolen 100 babies since the summer. And when we're working with these people and we're working in real trauma, we have to do healing work in real time. It's imperative for us to be working to heal and taking time and pacing ourselves and moving at the speed of trust. Holding those kinds of values is what helps us to move and heal. But I know that it's deep. I always talk about sometimes prisoners often believe in prisons more than anybody else in the whole society. I'll talk to brothers behind the walls, and they're like, well, sis, like, there's a lot of good brothers in here, but there's those ones that we don't want walking around outside. And I'm like, I understand that. I understand that there's real predators, that we know that there's real predators that have been created by all kinds of things in this society. But at the end of the day, we can't, this is not a sustainable structure. So we have to continue to have those tough conversations to help plant seeds, to bring people along. But most important is provide healing access, provide access for people to feel like they can weep, like especially men and boys. We're told we have to be hard all the time, boys. We tell our boys they got it. I raised 5 sons and 2 nephews, and I thought I was, and when I was a young mother, I thought I was preparing my sons for the world by teaching them how to be hard. And and now I recognize as a revolutionary mother, like my younger sons have a different experience. They've been taught self-determination, and they've been taught um, to be revolutionary minded. They've been taught that they are in control of their own destinies, that that they have strength, and that it's okay to feel. It's okay to weep. It's okay to need to heal. It's okay to pause and stop sometimes and to be with your people. And we have to do these things. And one of the most healing things that we can do together is going and putting our hands in the dirt. Like I said, Mother Earth gives us every single thing that we need to survive. We have tools. We have ashwagandha. We have, all these medicines from the earth. We have so many medicines from the earth that we can use to heal ourselves. But even by virtue, I take youth and just having them plant seeds in the ground in the spring is healing. And you can talk to them while you're doing these practices, you know, teaching about water therapy and sweat lodges. And like we have so many things around us that are designed to help us heal. But we have to normalize it in our own communities too. I mean, everybody want to be a gangster out here. Everybody got to be hard, and we got to continue to make it normal and natural and acceptable because that is who we are as a people. Like Justice Ubuntu is inside of us. The ideas of forgiveness and healing and moving forward as a tribe, those things are inside of us, and we just have to activate them. Our cells remember. That stuff is at our cellular level. We just have to awaken it. We have to awaken it inside of our people. But it is a process, and we have to be patient. Malcolm talked a lot about that, right? Everybody didn't know what you know today, so we got to be patient. We got to be patient with our people, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And we got to also teach more tools to our people. We live in an empire that taught us that violence is the answer to everything, you know, and we gotta address that. We gotta have other tools. We gotta teach our young people and arm them with tools of de-escalation, of cooperation. We have to start to address some of those symptoms so that we can try to overcome some of the things that are the traumas that we're seeing. Why are we shooting each other out here? We see these, I got kids in my community infatuated with Drakes, Dracos, and all these big old guns. I'm just like, if you see young people and you have a young person under you that is infatuated with weapons, well, go teach them to shoot. Take them to the shooting range. Have them sit with elders who have had to hold the weight of taking a life, so that they can start to grapple and understand what that means. What does it mean to have to hold that in your heart for your life if you had to shoot somebody? Teach them what that weapon does. Teach them about the safety necessary to be able to handle arms. Like instead we're just like, oh, take the guns, take the gun. Meanwhile, we have fascists who are training their kids from 10 years old how to shoot, training them, buying them weapons, making it natural and normal, teaching them that it's a tool. And in our communities, they're over here screaming the opposite thing, which is setting our kids up to be in a bad situation. Not only do they not know about them, they're learning about it from their homie that doesn't also know about them. They have no training, they have no experience, no knowledge, nobody's guiding them. And then we're just criminalizing them for it. And so we have to change the ways that we are moving as a people also. And so, like I said, I raised a lot of kids, 6 total, and all my kids know how to shoot. All my kids know about weapons. All of my kids understand what weapons do. My kids have been in the movement with me, and we have a community house. Community members who have been shot have landed on my doorstep before, you know, but the things, the things, it's not about the trauma. And this is what we also have to change the narrative about. Because we're not, as humans, we're not supposed to be like coddled in a bubble and never have anything bad happen to us, right? And be protected. What's supposed to happen is the experiences that we have, we're supposed to be able to be in an environment that we can heal through them and then gain the wisdom that was necessary from the lesson. And when we think about toddlers learning how to walk, who they fall down, they bump their heads, they're learning how to climb. Kids fall and hurt themselves all day as toddlers. And then in order to master learning how to walk. But we don't think nothing of that. And then all of a sudden people can't get hurt anymore. We passed that phase. But actually, these experiences are necessary for us in our human growth. It's sort of what the elder was telling me about as being a witness. These experiences are experiences that are necessary for us to understand the world that we are living in. It's not about the trauma. It's about how we are surviving the trauma. How do we reconcile from it? How do we heal from it? What is the wisdom and the lessons from it? And how do we move together as a people? And that's what Ubuntu is about. That's what these old traditional healing practices, there's never been humans in the world that didn't experience violence. that didn't have somebody with a big ego who came and tried to take over a tribe or had to fight or had wars. You know, humans have been having these experiences, but how do we survive them collectively for our collective survival? How do we gain the wisdom that's necessary for us to keep moving forward? Like these are all things that are going to come, as part of the ways that we build our revolutionary communities in our work. We have to build that into our movement. It's got to be natural for us to be able to talk about principled, being in principled struggle together, to talk about difficult situations. You know, I've had two of my young brothers who in my community, they shot each other. They actually were starting a war in the streets with each other. And I brought them in to my home. I disarmed them. We put all the guns up and I smudged the room and I dosed everybody with spikenard. And we had we had a restorative justice session. They had shot each other with ARs, but somehow we were able to restore because of trust, because they trusted me to be able to hold a space with them that we could be able to figure out like what are we shooting each other over. I'm telling you, we've had these experiences in our community, and I know it's possible. And we did all of that with no police, no state, nobody talking to nobody. We came together as a community who were in relationship to each other, who were hurting each other. And we got together and we sat down and we used traditional medicine and we figured out the problem. And by the end of it, there was a truce, and we even all took a picture together and put it on social media so the streets knew that it was dead, you know? And that can happen. It happens already. You know, there's people doing this work in the streets all over the place. We don't have to put it on social media or have it on TV or none of that. It's happening in our neighborhoods. The big homies, the OGs have always done that kind of work in our communities. And so when we think about violence and trauma, you know, it's the ways that we have the conversations. It's the ways that we help hold the narrative. Those things are important in the ways that we have to transform our thinking around the ways that we can heal as a people. Well, we're still getting free because there's
Let
going to
me
be more to come.
let me jump in real quick on that because I think what you're speaking about, and I would also like to agree that from the standpoint of your background and your heritage, is I think it's easier for you. But keep in mind that when if you just to go back to your black side, that we've been stripped of our culture. So when you first start with that, say if you are stripped of your culture, then you don't have your elders are also dysfunctional. So a good deal of what they can teach you is just not present. And I think a lot of what you're speaking on just speaks to what we will refer to as more or less the rites of passage. And it's not enough. I don't hear enough of that. Enough people that are aware of that. So we're taught through the school system. You know, it's the toddler the to prison pipeline. So we're taught to be individuals. We're taught to be divided. We're taught to be parts of the cog in the wheel, and we're taught to be self-destructive, so that we finally end up being utilized by the system in a corporate environment. Either you're going to go to college and get a degree and learn the 48 laws of power and manipulate the masses of people to be productive economically, or you're going to get behind bars and get utilized in that capacity. So the thing is how do we get you know the people to realize that there is a better way and that there's a collective way? And so a lot of the stuff you're speaking on to me goes back to some of the stuff Brother E drops on us a lot in regards to just re-identifying and reconnecting with culture. E,
Yeah.
I would like you to just hint on some of that, bro, because I think in the black community, a lot of what
I see.
Sister Comrade is talking about is just not present.
I mean, it. I think just in from what the sister is describing, and it tickles me to hear her, talk about things that, I mean, I guess at least from where I'm sitting, are I want to say vestiges, but are what do you call it? Our connections and whatnot that she has to the indigenous culture there, and it tickles me because it I don't know if I want to say it like this, but it kind of makes me giddy because it's something we don't have, obviously. So it's funny in a sense to me to hear somebody that's kind of on that dividing line between a group of brown folks that have some of that culture to pull on and to build on, and on the other side, it's the complete opposite. So it's a funny dynamic to me to hear that and to see that, and every time I kind of come across that. But yeah, I mean, what was your? I don't know the exact question that you were getting at, War, but yeah, that one component is I don't want to say it's a cure all, but it's the to me the most necessary component of any of it for any of us to make any progress in any direction is having that tie back and having that connection. But we've said this over and over throughout the years, that for us as a people, for black folk, for the African in this society, not having that culture and being teased, disparaged, put down, whatever, when it's attempted, just the idea of interjecting, or the act of attempting to interject the idea of culture being, you've had arguments for decades now with folks trying to get across that idea that culture is the bedrock. It is the people talk nowadays about black culture this and black culture that, and it's kind of irritating because I can't talk to folks and have that conversation to get them to understand that there is no black culture in this country. There, everything we do is a result of our oppression. It's a reaction to something that was thrust upon us, forced upon us, and we're making the best out of it. So essentially, regurgitating or spitting back the oppression that's been brought into our world, and making the best of it. Basically, that's our culture, is making the best of bullshit. I mean, that's what it is. That's what all black culture is. Um, and yes, it's founded, of course, on our tendencies and what it is we are, how we do things, how we move. That's why they can take, country music said over the years, back in the day, country music is the blues without soul, and so it's like that's how they express pain and the ideas and experiences in country music, versus the blues is how we express it. So it's the same idea, but because of that DNA, because of that is in us, that can't be weeded out, that's how it comes across. And so our expressions that we make at this point in time, it's not reflective of our culture. And so being able to tie back into who it is we are and rediscover what culture actually is, opposed to the cultural expressions, the things that you can see, the music, the clothes, and all of those things, the medicine, all of those are expressions of how we do things versus their expressions of how they do things. And sitting down and having a conversation to squash the beef and all of that, that's stuff we do. We do that. That's not how they deal with it. So it's an expression of how we do things, and how we do things is that culture, the underlying thing. They used to say when I was a kid, if you have to ask what soul is, it means you don't have it. So that's what it is. That's just in us. How we approach reality is different from how they approach reality. And so at this point in time, attempting, even those of us within the movement, attempting to address our situation, we do it not from how we do things. We keep trying to do it how they do things. And how they do things was never meant for us. It was never meant to resolve our issues. And that's why, for the most part, have retired from humanity at this point in life, because everything is so grounded and forced and dug in with with that mindset, with that their cultural expression, with their view on the world, that we can't even understand why certain things are traumatic for us as opposed to it works for them. You know, they're traumatic people. They thrive off of that trauma. We do not. So all of the stuff that they do and the way that they approach life just from, you know, out the womb is completely different from who we are. And getting that tied back into our culture and making that a crucial primary element in everything it is we do is absolutely necessary. So yeah, that kind of tickled me a minute ago when she was kind of when the sister when you were kind of bobbing and weaving the two together. I like that. That was kind of funny. That was cool.
Yeah, I really appreciate that and you saying that because I do want to say that the men that were shooting each other were black men. And they were
Yeah,
black men in my community
yeah,
who were my they're OGs in my community. They had got a whole bunch of little homies and they were able to receive the medicine. And but they trusted me to awaken that within them. And that's what it's about, right? We have to build real relationships, authentic relationships in movement where we understand the real meaning of what comrade means.
Hmm.
What does it mean to be a comrade and struggle? You know? And it's beyond personality and funding and all this weird shit like what brother's talking about here. You know, like we allow their structures to come into our movement all the time and play with our people, but I want to say like those were black men and they received the medicine and they trusted me to awaken that within them. Because like I said, all of us people have it within us. African people are indigenous people and it's inside of our cellular levels. My dad is black. He grew up in the Jim Crow South. I understand. My dad right now today, he's 80 years old and he'll tell me things like he'll see me on the news or something. He'll be like, "Oh, you messing with them people again?" He's a, and he would, you know, he in his life he was one of those stay out the way. You know, I just stay out the way. The police are beating me up today. Well, I'm gonna go a different way home. You know, he talks about being 9 years old and his cotton picking quota was 400 pounds when he was working plantations in Louisiana and Texas. And he would tell me about how he used to he would put small rocks in his sack to make it weigh more. And then his dad would tell him, just don't you get caught, you know? And so I understand all of that part too, right? But that's part of what we talk about as decolonization. Like we've been trained as a people. We have to awaken that within ourselves. I really appreciated the brother like really talking about that because you know yes I have an indigenous side and I'm very lucky that I've been mentored by indigenous healers. You know, Danae from Navajo Nation elders who have also mentored me. You know, people who are healers that have come to study in New Mexico. I've had a lot of access. I've been very lucky in my life. Um, but that's the medicine that we can share with other people. So yes, our Black people don't have access to it and haven't had access to it, and it's been denied and taken, but we can awaken it within our people. I can tell you when I go do work in the South and I share medicine and I share meditation and I share the ways that we do breath together, like it comes back. Our people are like, oh yeah, this feels very natural. And I'm like, yes, because it's inside of us. We're all indigenous, you know?
Yeah,
It's inside
yeah.
of us, you know, and being able to talk about the movement from that Pan-African lens helps to get some of this colonized empire shit out of the ways that we do our work too. I think, you know, that's another critical piece is always doing our movement, our liberation work from a Pan-African lens. You know, the way Kwame talks about, like we have to free Africa.
Hmm. You know, I wanna add to that dialogue. Kind of like what the sister said and what Brother E said. That leads us back to what revolution actually is. When we hear that term, we kind of forget to break down what that term means. And you know, I like to do I like to, and I'm gonna make this succinct. I'm not gonna go long with it, but I like to
There you
walk the
go.
path of understanding what revolution is, because naturally human beings evolve. We evolve. We go through things, we learn processes, and those processes are passed down from generation to generation, and we as a people are supposed to naturally evolve. Evolve means to go from a lower place to a higher place. Something happens in human society that can stop the evolution. It will bring a cessation to the evolution. The revolutionary is the person that recognizes that evolution has stopped. And that person says, oh, I need to bring back evolution, or I need to re evolve. I need to start the process back up. That's what revolution is, the re evolving. And what the sister did with the brothers that were shooting at each other, that's revolution. And they trusted her enough to take time to hear what she had to say. That's revolution. That's re-evolution. Even me and another brother of mine, we just had a conversation the other day. We was at a event. The sister was there as well. Selinda was at the event. We was at an event in Austin, and brother Rob called me up. Y'all know brother Rob. Brother Rob called me up and asked me to pour libations real quick. So I got up and I did libations, and I'm saying this because it goes back to what the sister and what brother E just said. Even if we don't consciously know, it speaks to us on a cellular level. When I did this in prison, the brothers was like, they was like dumbfounded when they first heard and poured libations. They were like, oh wow. It spoke to them. They understood it. We've been doing it for years in the hood. We take a 40-ounce bottle and pour out a little liquor for the homies. And we didn't know where that came from. But to get back to the point, so the brother Pharaoh, Brother Pharaoh and I was talking the other day, a couple of days ago. He was over here and we was talking, and he was saying, man, my wife being at the event in Austin and seeing you pour libations woke something up in her. So she got up this morning and she walked into the living room as I was doing my routine pouring libations, and she walked in and she said, oh, I know what that is. That's the point of libations. I understand that now. And he was telling me, he was like, man, I've been doing this since we've been married. But she always just walked past me like it ain't nothing. But after she saw you pour the libations at the event last weekend, she walked in and it was familiar to her now. Now she understood it. It talked to her. And that's re-evolution. That's bringing that evolution back. Brother E, I see your finger up. You got something you want to add on?
Yeah, and that's why we started instituting it back in the day. We didn't do it all the time, but there were those occasions that we had those events and whatnot where that would get implemented. We would have, matter of fact, when you came home from your vacation, at the end of the gathering that night, we had a little bit of a libation moment there at the end. But so I absolutely concur. And I think you mentioned it before. Culture is not something that you can impose on people and have it be their culture. Culture rises from the people. So all of that we did 10,000 years ago is still lying dormant there. And that's why it can be brought out. And that's why it touches. But that's where Kwame has talked about, a number of ancestors talked about it, but organizing and creating institutions, because the reality of it is, and we've had this experience throughout, is that we can set something up and the people are wired up about it, whether it's libations, whether it's going to Jasper and standing in the face of the pigs, ready to kill and die, and all of that. And the people love that, but having an institution to carry it on, because no matter how much it speaks to us in the moment, once that element of re-evolution, evolution, whatever you want to call it, once that is gone from that immediate scenario, everything goes back to just regular. We've talked about it before, how our children, especially, y'all know my oldest, were always around, and they would see certain things, the positive things, and it would have an impact on them. But then once they left my presence, they went back to their mother, the grandmother, going back to school, going other places that essentially ignored at best and at worst denigrated anything they might say of it. So having those institutions to long term reinforce what it is we've awakened. You know, that we set something off. Now there has to be something to cultivate, to nurture, to develop that along some sort of path, or it was just a good time. You know, it was a good moment. It was nice. Not to say that it can't plant seeds and do things that awaken people and cause people to say, oh, and carry that on and start doing it, long term themselves and sharing with other folks. But to sustain it for the long term, consistently in and I hate the word, but well, I won't even use it, but in a more evolutionary or revolutionary manner, there have to be those institutions that carry it on continuously, and that consistency is a major part. You know, I'm sure the sister part of how she developed trust with the brothers that she used as an example was being consistently in their life, having the same conversation over and over again, not necessarily that exact same conversation, but carrying that same verbiage, that same position. You know, she didn't switch up the program every time they saw her. It was the same. It was the same idea every time she came to them. It was that same thing, and so developing that consistent presence to develop a trust in it is a big part of institutions, the part that institutions and whatnot play in the role of those personalities that it comes in contact with, or that build it and gain from it.
True indeed. We have 12 minutes, y'all, and I want to get ready to land this plane, bring it to a close. So I'm gonna bring it to the closing section. Uh, Cause we could probably talk forever, building on the things that we're building on. But I want to bring this thing to a close, and I know the sister got a few activities she has to get involved with today. And I thank you, Selinda, for coming on the show and giving us a little bit of your time this morning. So for the people listening, also uh, send me the link to your YouTube channel, and I'll put it in the I'll put it in the the comments. I put it in the comment section. So anybody watching this video, y'all want to get some more on the sister, I'm gonna put the link in the comment section. I'm also gonna put the Millions for Prisoners New Mexico email in the comment section so you can reach out to the sister if you want to get some more information. But for the people listening, especially those who are directly impacted, because I didn't really get to dig into that as much as I would have wanted to.
Honestly, I tried the new bearskin hoodie and
Who is that? You, E? Let me mute
Nope.
you.
It's me.
Oh, okay. Thought that was E. So, what is your call to action for the people? For the people listening, for the people that are directly impacted, for the people, there are some people that's going to be in those institutions that have burners that's able to check YouTube out. What is your call to action for them? Sister Linda.
Sorry about that. I was grabbing the link to the YouTube for you.
Okay.
I'm dropping it here.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I want to say one thing about what Brother E was talking about a second ago is just that this is not it's not about a moment. This movement is what we're talking. This is movement. It's a way of life. It's the way that we have to change everything that we do. We have to change the way we behave every single day because we have to be in active resistance to the conditions that we're in. Like we have to remember that we're breathing this air of colonization. It's the water we drink. Like we're being trained every day when we turn on the TV, when we drive down the street, we're being trained into this empire to be obedient slaves. So it's every day with every act, just like the brother was talking about, you have to hold it inside of you. You have to make conscious decisions about where you're spending your money, where you're spending your time, what the conversations you're having with your children, with your community members, with your neighbors. Like it has to be a way of life. When you're doing liberation work, it's a way of life. And when you invite your community into that way of life, you have to model it for them. You have to show them. Why did those brothers feel comfortable landing on my doorstep? Because they've come to me for medicine before. They've trusted me. They've come to me when they've been in crisis before. And so people know that they can come to my door if they're in crisis and that they will receive and be held and whatever resources are available. And that's the kind of communities that we have to continue to build. It's a daily practice. I ain't walked in a Walmart in 20 years for no reason. There's nothing in this society that could make me need something out the Walmart, right? Like, how do we get our people to understand that? There ain't nothing for you in the Walmart. There ain't nothing for you there. As soon as we can help people wrap their minds around that kind of stuff, it's over. Bahati said it's going to be an economic revolution. It's not going to be armed. We can't, obviously that can't happen, right? They got nuclear war. They have already used the helicopter to blow up Move, decades ago. We already know they're not afraid to bomb us. And so it's not going to be armed. But as soon as we realize our real power, when we realize our real power, it's over. Game over. But we have to awaken that. And it's where we started this conversation at, right? Because it starts here. So my words to all of the people who are watching is start thinking about that cop in your head. And how do you get rid of that cop in your head? That tendency to want to police your community and check and regulate and power over and even the way we raise our children, this idea that children are property. Like my kid, we see men and women in domestic disputes all the time in our communities, weaponizing the children, using the children as a tool. The children have autonomy and they're independent humans. They're just at a different stage of growth. The Lord trusted us to raise them. They don't belong to us. They belong to the earth. And we have to start removing these ideas of ownership over land, ownership over people, including our own children. If we want to raise liberated children, we have to start raising them with autonomy. We have to start teaching them self-determination as soon as they're old enough to reckon with it as toddlers. We have to inspire that within inside of them. We're their guardrails. We're not their owners. And it starts there so that we can raise freer children. And as soon as our children can be free, even in their own homes and their own families, then we can start to transform the way that they go out into the world. And they already know we don't walk into Walmart. We don't do that. That's not natural to us, And so that's what I challenge the community with today is start thinking about every single thing you do, just like Chairman Hampton told us, everything you do is a political act. Everything you do is a political act. So you have to remember that as you move through the day, the way you talk to your partner, the way you talk to your children, the way you talk to your neighbor, that's a political act. Your existence and the way that you move in the world is a political act. So you can decide who you want to be today. Do you want to get freer or do you want to continue to be a slave?